Hey guys, I'm Joe McMenamin, and today I'm going to be answering the question of how do you prepare your canvas or board to do a painting, and then how do you finish it as well. So we're going to talk about gesso, primer, we're going to talk about varnishing, and we might talk about hanging as well. So when you're doing an artwork, you have to prepare the surface that you're going to be working on. Now, you're likely to be working on either canvas or wood. So there's two different main kinds of thing for, I'm talking about sort of acrylic or oil paintings. Now, if you're going to be doing watercolor painting, you do need to use watercolor paper. That's really important because it's thick enough to absorb the water and create those really cool watercolor effects that you want to get. But if you're painting with acrylic, I like to paint on wood grain, and I paint on plywood, different types of plywood, because I really like the kind of wood grain effect in the background. And I often won't even paint a background on my painting. But for yourself, if you decide to paint on canvas or on wood, you need to prepare it really well. Now, if you're buying a canvas and from a cheaper place or even a good quality one, it's likely that it's already primed with gesso. And gesso is just like a paint medium that you paint on before you actually paint. It helps the paint to stick really well to the surface. So if your canvas is already white, it's probably already primed or gessoed. If it's like a fabric sort of feel, like it's quite a matte feeling and you feel like the paint could absorb in, then it probably isn't primed, and so you need to apply a gesso to it. And that's pretty simple. You just buy gesso, it looks like this, and you can just buy it, paint it onto your canvas, and away you go. If you're using wood, there are some different types of wood. Sometimes you can get MDF, which is like a particle board wood, and you might want to prime that because it doesn't really have a nice wood grain. So you can just use gesso straight onto that. You can paint it on, and you can even sand it back to get it really nice and smooth. Actually, while I'm mentioning that, you can buy things like molding paste or other mediums that you can paint on underneath the gesso to create texture. So if you want like a really, like say you want a landscape and you want the land to be really kind of gnarly and textured, you can paint that on as a base coat before you even apply any paint. Paint mediums are great for changing the way that the paint behaves. So you can buy a medium that, for example, makes the acrylic paint not dry very fast. So it keeps it wet for longer, which means that you can be a bit slower with your blending, you can have a bit more control over it. You can buy a medium that kind of waters down the paint, makes it transparent, but keeps it really thick. So that's like a glaze, so you can have layers of glaze without making really washy layers. And then you can buy mediums that make the paint thicker as well. So there's lots of different ones that you can do. You can experiment and try out what's going to work with your style of art. But in terms of the wood, now if you want to paint onto plywood or something where you want to keep the nice wood grain, then you don't have to prime it at all. All you have to do is sand it so it's nice and smooth, ready to work on, and away you go. So there are a couple of different types of plywood that I use in my art. There's the kind of standard ply that looks like this, and then there's the Akumi ply that looks like this. And that has a bit more of a kind of richer brown. And it says Akumi is an Australian hardwood. You can get it in New Zealand, but it's not quite as common. So you have to either get a special order or find somewhere that stocks it. And normally with that plywood, what I do is I buy it by the sheet, and then I cut it down to size, make a frame for the back, and then kind of trim all the edges nicely. So it's quite a good way. You can make your own sizes, shapes. You need a few little woodworking skills there, but it's not too hard to do it. You can also make round wooden artworks by using a router and just cutting out the shape of a circle, or you could find someone who knows how to do that and ask them to cut it out for you. Another advantage of painting on wood is that if you make a mistake, you can actually sand it back and get right back to the lovely wood grain at the end. So you've prepared your artwork, you've painted it, and now you're ready to finish it. So how are you going to finish your artwork really well? So there's a few different things that you can do. One thing you can do with acrylic is just to leave it as is. You can not worry about it, just put it up, and especially if it's canvas, just hang it straight on the wall like that. But you might decide that you want to do a varnish on it. Now, a varnish is going to be like a protective layer. It means, if you get dust on it or fly poo or something like that, you can wipe it off. That's super easy. So there's a couple of ways to do varnish. You can buy a varnish that's a liquid that you paint on, or you can buy a varnish that is like a spray coat. And usually they come in like a matte or a gloss finish. And it's really just about the look that you want to go for. Like, do you want like a really shiny artwork? Do you want it just to be matte? Yeah, that's just a decision about the look of it. I had a little play with some resin actually last year. So I bought some art resin and applied it to a few artworks that I did on the wood, and it creates like a really beautiful glossy surface on the artwork, which has quite a cool look on its own. It is a bit tricky. You've got to mix two parts together, and you need a little butane torch to like get rid of the bubbles in there. But once you get it down, it's got a really cool effect, and it's sort of, I don't know, it makes the artwork look kind of maybe more professional, or certainly more glossy. So that's one thing you can do. Just a little note on that though, you do need to get decent resin. This is the stuff that I use. I tried out some stuff from like just the hardware store, but it didn't work very well. It was really smelly and it wasn't very flat, and also they tend to yellow over time, those kind of hardware ones. So you want to spend the money and get like a decent art-based resin. The other option for finishing your artwork, and this is really good if you're working on wood, is to use something called Danish oil. So I use Danish oil a lot in my artworks. And what that does is actually made for furniture or basically wood grain, and it brings out the beautiful grains through the wood. So you just paint it on. You can paint it on and then wipe it back if you want quite a thin layer, or you can leave it on really thick if you want it to be a bit more glossy. But Danish oil is quite a cool product to finish as well. It makes the browns in the wood grain even richer and warmer, so that's quite nice. And I just paint straight over top of the acrylic paint as well. It actually brightens the colours and makes it look really good, so that's what I like to do. And then on the back of your painting, you want to put some string across, so you need a couple of your little eyelets or little D-rings. Screw them onto the frame, and then you run your string and then tie it off and then tape it around itself. So there's probably lots of videos that you can watch about how to string your artwork, but you can hang a canvas straight onto the kind of frame on the edge, but it's not ideal because it will eventually kind of warp with the weight of it. And it's better to have a string, then you can actually adjust it, make sure you've got it, really nice and level. One of the other things that's quite fun to try is to paint on found objects. There's lots of different ways of doing this, but one way that I found was really cool is I scored some really old wooden cupboard door frames, and they had like a beautiful frame around them, and so I painted directly onto the middle of that. So you can find objects. You might find like a crusty old piece of plywood that's got lots of kind of grungy edges on it, and then paint on that. You can really paint on anything, can't you? I mean, I've done a series of paintings on skateboards. So you could have old, rustic kind of skateboards, or you could buy new blank skateboards. And I've even cut out plywood shapes in the shape of skateboards. So they're not even really skateboards, they're just the shape, which is quite cool as well. So I encourage you to try and look around you and see what you can find. You might be able to get like a piece of wood, like a round, and paint onto a round. Or, just a wooden block, or I mean, obviously I like painting on wood, but you can find other things that you can paint on, like you can paint on plates. Everything is going to have its own sort of, you know, separate set of challenges as well, but just encourage you to try and paint on some found objects. Cool, so I hope that's helpful for you when you're thinking about preparing your canvas or wood and then how you're going to finish it as well. If it threw up any more questions, then pop them down in the comments and I'll make another video to talk about it. Or if you have any other random questions about art or the business of art or any questions for me, then pop them into the comments as well. Thanks for watching, and stop watching YouTube. Go make some art.